For more on what's at stake in Russia's elections, we're joined in the studio by our chief foreign editor, Robert Parsons. Hello to you, Rob. What sort of election is this when the outcome is not really in doubt? No one's wondering who's going to win.
Well, I noticed you said that the outcome was almost certain. I think one can say safely, unless something happens to Vladimir Putin's health over the next 2 or 3 days, that it is an absolute certainty that he's going to win this election. There is no suspense whatsoever, and that's its prime difference between what's happening in Russia at the moment and what you would expect to see in a typical Western democratic election. There are some similarities. The trappings of an election are present there. You see an awful lot of money, indeed, has been spent by the Russian state on these elections, on TV campaigns, on billboards put up all over the main cities. Although it's interesting, the outside of the main cities, the elections aren't so present at all. But the money that's been spent on television, pushing forward the candidacy of Vladimir Putin, trying to ram home the idea that he is what is essential for the resurrection of Russia as a global power, that the glory of Russia is resting on the shoulders of Vladimir Putin. You know, this sort of nationalistic idea, which is linked in turn, of course, to the war in Ukraine. That is something that has been first and foremost in this campaign. But there has been, you don't see any of the backwards and forwards of an election campaign in the West where ideas are challenged and re-challenged, and the candidates examine each other and argue with each other and polemicize their points of view on television. You don't see any of that. So what it really comes down to in the end, I think this is what's important, first of all, for Vladimir Putin, is that the numbers should get out and vote. Last time round, I think the turnout was 67.5%. That's in 2018. They'll want at least 70%. And what's important to them is legitimization. You know, everybody knows that if they don't get the 70% they're looking for, they'll make sure they do get it by one way or another. And that's one of the reasons I imagine that they're holding these elections over 3 days, so that the opportunities for ensuring that figure is reached will be there. But just to be able to say, look, people of Russia have voted. They've voted in their vast majority for Vladimir Putin and in great numbers. They don't care in the Kremlin whether the rest of the world is mocking them for a sham election. What they want to be able to do is turn to the Russian people and say, you voted, thank you very much, another 6 years of Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, and there are 3 other people running. Is that just for form's sake?
Well, in a way, but it's part of the trappings of Russian democracy. To give them, it is. It's for form's sake. To say, look,
illusion of choice.
It's an illusion of choice. I mean, if you look at the 3 candidates who are standing. Start with Nikolai Kharitonov, who's the leader of the Communist Party. You know, there was a time in the post-Soviet period when the Communist Party was a genuine challenger for power. In the mid-1990s, when Yeltsin was standing for re-election, there was a genuine fear that the Communist Party would defeat him. Since then, the Communist Party has been marginalized and it's become just a sort of prop of the democratic or pseudo-democratic system that we see in Russia. He's 75 years old. He's been a member of the State Duma.
That's young by U.S. president standards.
That's true. That's true. But he's been a member of the State Duma, it's the lower house of the Russian Parliament, since 1994. Leonid Slutsky is the leader of the Liberal Democratic Party of Russia, which is neither liberal nor democratic. It's very nationalistic and right-wing, very hawkish on the war in Ukraine. I mean, he might get somewhere like 3% of the vote. Kharitonov, the communist, might get a bit more than that, but not into double figures. The interesting one, I suppose, is Vladislav Davankov, the leader of a new party, which is called the New People's Party. He's a sort of pro-business, slightly liberal, but still supports the regime. So he's not a real choice. The interesting one would have been, for a while he was slated to appear in the election, Boris Nadezhdin, who had an anti-war position. He got the 100,000 votes necessary to get onto the election slate, but then was pushed off by the Central Election Commission because they said he had people on that list who were already dead. I mean, they just wanted to get rid of him because his position was anti-war, and he was gaining traction. He was into double figures in the opinion polls, and it looked like he could pose a real, genuine challenge, not to win in the election, but to be a threat of some kind, political threat of some kind to Putin. So they pushed him aside. So basically what you're left with is these three who pose no sort of challenge whatsoever. Just a little anecdotal thing about Kharitonov. The BBC asked him a question when he was on the stump. Why do you think you would make a better president than Vladimir Putin? He was, normally that's an opportunity if you're a candidate to put your point of view across. He was totally flummoxed and said, not for me to answer that question.
So often the story in Russia, not who's running, but who isn't running. Yeah. Rob, thank you very much. Rob Parsons, our chief foreign editor.